Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So since my view is kind of blocked by the phone right here, in case you have a question, if the moderator, whoever is moderating the meeting, just do a shout out to me, I will be able to answer the questions you guys have.
Sure.
So welcome everybody. Today I'm just going to be talking more about how I work with colored pencils on pastel board using the Neocolor and colored pencils. I'm sure you have seen a lot of colored pencil work because there are so many great artists in the group who do colored pencils. I started out with pure colored pencils back in 2004, and that's when I discovered CPSA, and I had a lot of great teachers and mentors over the years, and I've learned from a lot of them. They are my, kind of my second family here in the United States, and they have been very helpful, a great group of artists who are willing to share their knowledge and help you grow. So if you're not a member of CPSA and you love colored pencil, I highly encourage you to join them. And they have a lot of information that you can get as being a part of a CPSA member, the most important being their Light Fast book, where you understand how colored pencil works, what are the different types of colored pencils available, and what are the good light fast colored pencils that are out there. So when I started colored pencils, I started on Stonehenge, the regular paper, and I found that it took a lot of time to do larger pieces, right? Like, because you'll be doing layer by layer and it takes a while for you to get that coverage, get that saturation going on. So that's when I discovered the Neocolor 2. So it's by Caran d'Ache. It looks like a very regular crayon, like a Crayola crayon, but the pigment has, it's a very good light fast pigment too, and it's water soluble, and it has a pastel binder in it. So what I do is I first layer them dry on a pastel board, and then I add water, and then I add layers of colored pencils on top of them and blend them using a bristle brush. So this is a bristle brush that you can get at any craft store. I usually cut the tip off, I trim them, and I keep them pretty stiff. Usually they come like this, and the edges are a little longer and they're soft. But when you use these to blend the Neocolor, they don't blend as much. So it's always a good idea to kind of cut the bristles, keep them short and stiff. That way you can blend them better. The first step I do is just do a transfer drawing on a pastel board. Let me say, are you guys familiar with the pastel board? You can say yes or no.
I am. Yes.
No. Okay, so pastel board is, let me see if I have any. It's made by Ampersand. So they come in different colors, the tan, the gray, white, and green. And it's kind of a hard board with the MDF kind of backing, and it has a very toothy surface on top. It's not too much of a texture, but there is definitely some texture going on. It's very good with pastels. It's great for colored pencils as well. I usually, yes.
Ranjini, the pastels you are using, are they oil pastels, water-soluble oils, or just the soft pastels?
These are not pastels, so they are not chalky. They're just wax pastels. They're called wax pastels, but they just look like a crayon, exactly like a crayon.
Okay.
And they come in sets of 12 and all the way up until 126. I think a 48 is a good starter set. And I got these several years ago and I still have them because a little goes a long way with Neocolors. You just have to use very little. So I'm gonna just do a mini demonstration here. I have like a couple of demos planned. So I'm gonna start with a couple of cherries that I drew with a Col Erase pencil. This is no graphite pencil. So I use this because I don't want to have any graphite on my drawing. I usually tape my board to a hard, like a cardboard. It's easier when I'm handling it. So I just drew a couple of cherries, and I'm gonna start applying the newer colors on it. Just pulling up my reference here. So this is a dark carmine. The name usually is written here. It's the alizarin crimson. I have never, people always ask me if I use some kind of a sharpener to keep my neocolor sharp, but I have never had the issue, because when I apply, it's a very loose stroke. So I never sharpen them. When you apply neocolors on pastel board, the first thing you should always remember is do not press too hard. It'll appear as if you're barely laying any color on the surface, but trust me, when you add water to this, it's gonna darken up significantly. So say if you can lay down a pressure scale of 1 to 5, this is a 1. So I'm barely touching the surface when I start. The reason you don't want to press too hard is because when you add water to neocolors, and if you have too much of pigment right on the first layer, it's gonna eat up your tooth and you won't be able to apply any colored pencil on top of that later on. So I'm barely touching it and I'm just having fun. I'm just like, kind of scribbling my way here. No, just following the contour of the subject. I usually prefer working on the gray or the tan board because I like to have a, kind of a mid-tone going on a piece of work instead of the white. And I also found that the white pastel board has more tooth than any other color. So I was kind of curious and wanted to ask Denise, what color pastel board did you use for your piece?
Mine's on the white pastel board.
Okay, did you find it was easy working on the white pastel board?
It was, there were a few little struggles.
Because I always found that the white was not very forgiving to me. So
I don't think I've ever worked on the gray, so I can't compare. But so that was good info from you to hear that they actually have a different tooth.
They do. And
do they have just gray and white?
They have gray, white, tan, and there's a green too. The green kind of looks like that.
Okay.
So, yeah. But I usually, if I'm doing a landscape, I usually choose a green. But most of my still life and my trompe-l'oeil work, I just choose between the tan and the gray, depending on if my palette is warm or cool. So you can see that I'm layering multiple colors right now. So I did a dark red, the alizarin crimson, then I used my carmine, and then I'm using like a darker gray as well. So I'm doing multiple layers, but I have not added water yet, but I'm just mapping out my colors.
Can the wax pastels be used on any other paper, or it's just with the pastel mat?
The pastel board, yeah, you can use this on Stonehenge, you can use this on any other paper as well that can take water, like an arch. It has to be like a watercolor paper. It has to be, it has to withhold water. If you use it on a very thin paper, then it's gonna buckle. And it can be used in conjunction with any other medium as well, because this dries pretty fast too.
It can work on the wood as well.
Yes, it can work on wood as well.
The nice thing about them is you can use them 3 different ways. You can use them as crayons. You can use them the way Junkie is using with water, or you can use them with heat.
Yes, I've not used the heat so much on them, but I think they're very good with heat too. Does Cecile use it with heat? I don't know who uses with heat, but somebody.
No.
So I'm just doing my highlights with a little bit of white where I want. My white's gonna kind of fade out when I add the water. But I'm just, I wanna make sure that I know where my highlights are. I don't wanna lose them. There. And I'm gonna do the background. I'm just using a blue. You see that when I'm gonna do the background, I'm not gonna worry so much about the stem because I'm gonna be adding water and that's gonna kind of merge into the stem as well. So that will be done only with colored pencil. So I'm just gonna add the blue right now. Another thing to keep in mind, when using the Neocolor on pastel board, since, as I said, keep the strokes pretty light. And also try to keep, like if you're doing a background, say if you wanna, cover a large area, right? So try to keep your strokes in the same direction. You can do multiple direction as long as you're not pressing into the board too hard. I try to keep it like either all vertical or horizontal.
I think it's worth mentioning too that the pastel board, there's no direction to the
yeah, no, yes, it's like sand, right? Yeah. It's like, just sand laid out on a board.
Yeah.
Nice fine tooth sand, yeah.
This sticks to that.
Since you mentioned sand, I'll try it on sand. I haven't done that.
Yes, of course. Just, doing a different color for the. I'll show you first like what to do and then also what not to do, because that's when you understand how these actually work. So I'm adding a little bit of yellow so that you guys can see when I add water, it's kind of a cool effect to see it turn green.
So these pastel board come in a standard size. How do you cut it? You cut it.
You can actually use, the thick craft knife, score it, and break it into custom sizes if you want to. Okay. But they come in standard sizes of 6x6, 5x7, 8x10, 9x12, 11x14.
They come in smaller size.
The largest that they come in is 24 by 36.
Okay, thank you.
They have some unique sizes like, 6 by 18, 6 by 12 as well, like the panoramic landscape.
So Ranjini, when you did pastel, so that is like you're keeping your hand really soft or putting any kind of pressure at all?
No pressure at all. That's what I wanted to kind of show you. So this is how my first layer goes. So you can see my strokes are fairly not too close to each other, but still kind of close to each other. You see how light the color is, right? But I'm gonna press the same colors I used in my, like in a regular pressure on how we usually use a crayon, and you can see how that will look. So this is a scrap piece of pastel board. So if I'm saying, like how we write using a pen, this is the pressure. And you see the same blue, how dark it is if I'm pressing that hard. So you don't want to be pressing this hard in your first layer. If you press this hard, then it's gonna kind of cover your pastel board really smooth, and then you won't be able to add any colored pencils on top of that. So that's the kind of pressure we want when we start. So that's like a pressure 1, that will be like a pressure 4. So a good idea when you start with neocolors is whatever color you want to use, do have like a scrap piece of board or paper and make a chart of how it looks when you with a pressure 1 and your pressure 5, and then add water and see how it looks like before you actually use on a piece. I've used them multiple times, so I know like how each color responds, but if you're using it for the first time, it's always a good idea to try it out on a piece of paper or a pastel board and then use it on your actual piece.
I was just going to say, Ampersand, they're really good family-owned company, and if you contact them, they can make special sizes, even bigger or smaller or whatever too.
They also do the, what do you call that, Denise? Like the panel, like a frame behind the panel that you don't need to put a frame on. So
oh yeah, the floater
battery wrapped canvas, right? Like that.
The floater frames. Yeah, I in fact that's what I used on my piece today. It's one of their floater frames made to fit that.
They're very good.
Floater frame? Yeah, it's screwed to it.
Oh, wow.
It comes with all the hardware and everything. Well, it's about 1/8 inch thick. It's like a piece of MDF board or something. And by the way, Lens Arts in Santa Cruz, they sell all the Ampersand, all their boards, pastel board, gesso board, everything. Yeah, but I mean, if you want to support a local business, go to Santa Cruz.
Yeah. Could you share the
website?
Yeah, website too.
So I'm just gonna add water on top of my colors now. So I'm starting with the background. So once I add water, you'll be able to see how dark this color is gonna get. This is the regular watercolor brush. And you saw like how light I used the color, but you see how dark it's getting once I add water. So the reason I asked you to, keep the strokes consistent is, when you add water, it's easier to manipulate the color. Sorry, do you have a question? Anybody?
No, really.
So these are great for when you have large backgrounds to cover. Takes a long time in colored pencil.
Let's say in this process, if we lose the drawing,
you can retrace your drawing if you're used to tracing. You can retrace after this step again, top of the new color.
Ranjini, how wet is your brush?
Good question. Okay, let me show you. So I'm just dipping my brush in water And, you know, okay, I don't know if you can see, I'm just dipping my brush in water and doing that like a couple of times. And that's how much water I have. So it's not damp. It's definitely not damp. It is wet, but it's not too wet. It's kind of in between.
Okay.
Make sure you are not adding a lot of water. When you add a lot of water, you're going to wash out the new color and you're going to expose the board. You don't want that either. But that's something you can repair. In case that happens, once the layer is dry, you just go back in with more neo color and you're good to go.
How many layers could we do like this?
There's no limit to doing neo colors on pastel board. You can keep going as long as you want. But if you want to add colored pencils on top, I would say just stop with one layer of neo color. But if you're just using neo colors, you can keep going.
So my question is, if you have a very dark background in your reference picture, you would use black or a dark color to cover up the background to make things faster, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So I don't care so much about my brush strokes drawing or, you know, that it has to be like exactly perfect or anything like this, like that at this point. I just want to have a map of what I'm going to be using for the next couple of layers using my colored pencil. One of the things about neo colors is the lighter colors tend to leave a residue. So if you look closely, where I use my lighter yellows and lighter blues, you see these white dots. So they are gonna leave that residue whenever you use light colors. To get rid of that, you can use a damp brush. So it's barely wet, just a damp, the layer has to be dry. So first, when I do this, I just let it dry. I know my spots are in there. I let it dry and I just use a damp brush and I just go over that lightly. I can even use like a fuzzy brush, the brush that you don't want to, you know, paint with, but you still save it around. So you just use that and you can just tap on it and it kind of goes away, but it has to be just damp.
And Janie, do you ever find that the water sort of washes away the grit of the surface?
No, water never washes away the grit. At least for me, I've never experienced that before.
Yeah, because I've experienced that. It can be kind of frustrating.
The white, maybe?
Yeah,
That's
maybe
why I never
so.
work with the white. I never work with the white, Denise. I did 2 drawings in white and I decided I'll never use white. I don't know why, but somehow it never works for me. The only thing I did in white was a demo piece. I'm gonna put this aside so that this dries because I don't want to add water to my cherries when my background is still wet. So this will dry in a couple of minutes. So I'm just gonna set this aside. So let's do some. So this was a demo piece. So in one of the classes that I did. So this board, when I touch it, I can immediately see the difference between the one that I just used and accidentally place my.
And that is a white pastel board, right?
This is a white pastel board. This is how much white that it is. It's not a, it's a warm white. And I have multiple layers of colored pencils on this, and that's the Neo Color wet layer. And the tooth on this one is almost smooth. I can barely feel any tooth left, but I'm gonna show you some common mistakes that happen with using the color. Sorry, I can take this off. Let's see. Okay. Let's use a dark color that way you can see. Let's do the red. So if you press really super hard on your first layer, see like that, let me make a bigger circle. I'm pressing really hard and I try to paint. It is gonna look very pretty. It's gonna be like super red and pretty right away. And you'll be super happy that, hey, all my tooth is gone. Like I can barely see any white. So it's gonna be nice, but this will also eat your tooth completely. So once this is dry, if you run your finger on top of it, it's gonna be super slick. So you won't be able to add a lot of color pencils to model your surface. Then let's try adding more water. Okay, like what Denise was talking about. So when you add a lot of water, my brush is literally dripping with water, and I try to paint it. You kind of overdo it, accidentally overdo it.
Well, we're not saturated.
It is going to,
like the amount that she's using there.
It's gonna, you're gonna expose the board and not the actual color. So you have to dab, clear out. But there are some easy way to correct what's happening on a pastel board. As you can see, I completely wiped down the whole thing. So if you made a mistake and if your layers are pretty light, you will still be able to wash the board right away and start over. And I have done that with a couple of pieces on my gray and tan. I never lost a tooth. If I made a mistake in the background, and if I wanted to change a background to say like from blue to black, and then I just wash it down, if my layers are really light, I will be able to get back to the same tooth. Another way to correct mistakes is using battery operated eraser. And this has the ink cartridge on it. So this has multiple layers of colored pencil and Neocolor that's been dry. And this has been sitting in my studio for way too long. So if I want to, erase something I made a mistake, I can go cut right across and expose the board. And you would never be able to do that on a paper, never. So that's something that's really cool about working on pastel board, that you will be able to correct your mistakes. Any questions so far?
So can this be used as a layer, as the first few layers, if I'm doing a watercolor piece?
Yes.
Can this NeoPastel be used?
It's not NeoPastel, it's the Neocolor. So there are two Neocolors, the Neocolor 1 and Neocolor 2. The Neocolor 1 is an oil pastel. That that's not water soluble. That's just a regular oil pastel. But the Neocolor 2 can be used like a regular watercolor, yes. So you can shave the pieces, put it on a piece of palette and use it like watercolor. That's how versatile. Hopefully our piece is dry to touch. Yeah, it is. It's just a little cold on the edge, but it's almost dry. So I'm just gonna use that damp brush and remove my because I don't wanna. The reason I'm removing those grains is because they do have a texture. They will be bumpy if you start to put colored pencils on top of them. So you don't want them on your piece. And that's only with the lighter colors. Any colors with lighter value will have that grain.
I wonder why that is.
Sorry?
I wonder why that is that the lighter colors behave that way and not the darker colors.
Yeah. When I look closely, some of the reds do have that, but they you know, they are more soluble with water. But somehow the lighter colors are not that soluble. I don't know why. Maybe it's something they have in their binder.
Yeah, or the pigment itself.
Yeah. It's funny that on their website, this is listed under hobby stuff. Yeah, it's not even under their regular artist material, but it has very good light fast ratings.
So one question, you are doing the red and leaving that white.
Yes, I'm saving my highlight. I will be doing it, but I want my red to be dry.
So every time when you do another color, do you change the brush or do you use the same brush?
It's a regular watercolor brush, right? So I just wash it when I'm using it. But when I blend, that's when I have different brushes.
Okay.
That's it, was dissolving by, yeah.
So I feel like I can add a little bit more red here. So if I feel like, you know, I need a little bit more red, it's just too light for me, I can always go back and add more color whenever I need. But I make sure that I still have tooth left to work with my colored pencil.
If I understood correctly, we are doing more with neo colors first, making the base very strong before we started with the colored pencil.
Yes,
then it is less work with colored pencil.
Well, I won't say it's less work with colored pencil, but it's just speeds up the process for colored pencil, mainly because to reach this saturation with colored pencil, it's going to take you at least, you know, 5 to 6 or even more.
Yeah.
Is this going to count as mixed media?
Yes, this will be mixed media. This is not 100% colored pencil.
And technically, you can finish it up with with pastel pencil, right?
You can finish it with pastel pencils too.
Okay.
I personally don't use a lot of pastels because of the dust and the fact that when I frame my piece, I varnish and I frame without glass. And that's not something you can do with pastels, right? So.
Yeah, that's another nice thing about this particular process is that when you're all done, you don't need to go have it framed under glass. And it's just, there it is, just like working on canvas or something.
Yeah, and the finished piece actually looks like an acrylic painting or an oil painting.
It's just multiple layers of spray varnish.
So the varnish that I use is the Lasco varnish. I don't use anything else other than Lasco fixative and Lasco varnish. I can send the material list to you guys if you're interested on what are all the products that I used.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. That would be great.
So like, so this piece, I don't know if you can, okay, let me show it this way. Okay, this piece, this one's 100% colored pencil on pastel board. So you can do 100% colored pencil also on pastel board, but you see like it looks like a painting once it's done. I don't have glass on it. You don't want to scratch and see, but it is protected with several, like, at least like 4 layers of fixative and 4 layers of the UV varnish. I always tell people, please do not hang it on direct sunlight. But this has been seeing partial sunlight, but I have not seen any color changes happen on it so far.
Just be careful when you're spraying the spray varnish on that the can doesn't spit. I had that problem with my.
Oh, yeah. But you always make sure you, I'm trying to see if make sure you shake it really well and wear the, the protection that's needed. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. I do it outside on my porch, and I try to keep the painting, kind of covered, not completely, but like a net. That way you don't have any debris falling on it when you have the varnish, because the varnish is kind of sticky. And if you just spray it and just leave it outside, something's going to fall on it. It's just going to stick on it. And you don't want that to happen. So just make sure when you're spraying, you kind of keep it. I kind of made a box, and I just took a big Amazon box and put a net on top, and I just keep that covered with it. It's easier. So have something like that to, when you varnish. So my piece is still drying here. So you see how my whites actually, kind of washing away. The white will dry very light. You will almost see the board. That's okay, because I just want to have a map of the area on where my highlight is. More pink than white at this point. Blending it with the
that's what I was thinking. I wanted the white to be really white.
Okay, for this subject, but that's a big demand for
yeah. I do have several pieces of the gray, but I haven't used them yet. The sizes.
I'm just touching my edges to make sure I have color everywhere. And I always check if there's no neo color that's kind of pooled up in one place and the board's kind of nice and even before I start my colored pencil. Because if you water the way you're painting, if the water is pooling up somewhere and you have the neo color kind of clumped up, that's gonna again show up when you add your colored pencils on top. So let this dry for a little bit.
Beautiful.
So when this dries, I'm going to show you something else. Any questions so far? You guys are a quiet group.
We are already mesmerized with your work.
Yes.
So, okay, let me keep this. Okay, so I was working on, with all the rain that's happening, I just wanted to do like what I call is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Elizabeth Patterson, colored pencil artist. She's amazing. She does these wonderful, windshield with water, the glass behind, like the landscape, and there's this glass and the water splattered on top kind of work. And I was just looking outside and I liked all this teal and green, and I wanted to do something like that, kind of a Walmart version of what she does. So I just wanted to do like a demo of the piece. So this one has the Neocolor already. And what I did with that was I applied the Neocolor and I used a spray bottle. It's just water in it. And I sprayed instead of painting on top of the Neocolors. And that kind of produced a very interesting effect. And I thought that was kind of cool. And I was just moving the board when I did that. And it gave way to some interesting shapes. It kind of looked like the distant, the mountains and the greens. And I just manipulated a very little bit with my brush, not a lot, but it was more like movement. And I wanted to add like watercolor droplets on top of that. You can see it.
They look real.
Yeah, they look very real.
But so I wanted to show you what I did here. I actually used the color erase pencils and I did the circles first where I wanted. I just placed them. I placed some large ones and I'll be placing more smaller ones as I go, just to, kind of strategically place them. I want the eye to move around everywhere. But then I used second layer of Neocolor on it. So I thought that would be something interesting to see, which I normally don't do unless, there's a very fine detail. So the background, I started covering the background with colored pencil. I'm using Derwent's. Oh, this is another thing that I wanted to say. The colored pencils, the choice of colored pencils that are really good for a pastel board from my perspective, Derwent's are really great. The main reason being they're more chalky and they kind of go.
Which Derwent's?
Color Softs.
Oh, okay.
They're really great. I don't have the new ones, the new Derwent's, haven't tried them yet. Prismacolors are, they're great too. The darks, the white and the black are always Prismas for me still. I haven't found a better black and white yet. I also like the Karandash. They are great. But for the initial layer, I always tend to go with my Derwent Color Softs because they are very good at covering the surface quickly and they blend together with Neocolors seamlessly. So I started doing the background using the Color Soft Cloud Blue. And I always use my electric sharpener. And the one I have is the Panasonic KP310. I brought them off eBay like a very long time ago and I still hold them very dear to me. So when you start adding colored pencils on top of Neocolors, it's important your first layer to keep your pencils fairly sharp and your strokes very close to each other. And also the direction. Try to keep them in same direction, vertical or horizontal. You can always go back and do another layer with another direction, but the first layer, try to keep things uniform. Because when you blend with a bristle brush, it blends easily. And I keep turning my pencil so that I can hold on to that sharp point for some time. But your pastel board is going to eat your pencils very quickly, unlike paper. So that will be, kind of a surprise for if you've been used to working on paper and you're suddenly working on pastel board, it'll come as a shock. Your pencils are going down fast, but to me, the results are worth it. I'll do more blending on the cherries, but for this one, I just want to show you how I do the second layer of Neocolors. So for this, since they are small areas, I don't want to use the crayon directly. So I'm just taking the crayon and.
So how did you make the dots before?
Yeah. So I just drew them with pencil.
Okay.
Like a watercolor pencil.
Okay.
And I'm just using my brush and actually like just taking the paint and painting it. So I'm just painting my water drops so that I can see them. Just let it dry. Usually when I do a large piece and I have a lot of things going on, I do the Neocolor layer and let it dry overnight just to be on the safe side. And then I come back to it the next day to do my colored pencil. I make sure, so you see like where I painted all the blues, I'm just gonna let it dry. And then I'm gonna go back with colored pencil to make all my water drops. It's just my cherries are dry. So when this one dries, let's work on this. So now we start working on our cherries, and now you can see how we blend. I have a tendency to hold all my pencils in one hand. I think a lot of us do that. So I'm starting with a black raspberry, one of my favorite colors in Prismacolors. Again, keeping a very sharp point, keeping my strokes very close to each other, going in one direction. I'm following
that's a Prismacolor.
Yes, this is a Prismacolor. So I have Prisma here. I haven't found a match for black raspberry in Derwent's.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the magic colors.
Yeah.
That's
the black raspberry?
What?
The black raspberry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black cherry and black raspberry, they're magic.
They are lovely colors.
Oh. I thought the black raspberry was not a dirty color. Are you sure?
Huh?
Are you sure? I thought it was only the black cherry.
You said dirty color? No, I said magic. They're magic.
Magic, yeah. See, yeah, that's why they are. I just love them.
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, by the way, the reason we are saying dirty colors is for people who are not familiar with the term. They are colors that are not light fast, so they tend to they tend to disappear.
You mean
most of the pinks and purples are. Yeah. Sorry?
You mean fugitive colors?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I didn't use the word dirty.
Yeah. Somehow, I'm sorry, I heard it as and I was like, oh no, this is like one of my favorites and I really don't want to lose it. I really don't want to lose it.
Yes.
I'm working on a piece right now that has a lot of pinks. I'm finding it extremely hard to find, good pencils, but I'm working with the Holbeins and I'm hoping they're good.
Same here. I'm working on a piece which is having almost 75 to 80 colors in just one area. And it's kind of killing.
Yeah. It's hard, like when you have to work with a pink purple palette. So apart from the pastel board, the other surface that I really like is the drafting Durolar, the Durolar film. They're also great surface to work with. You can use it, you can work on either side of the film, and I'm finding it fascinating to work on that as well.
we see the opportunity of having another demo from you.
Sure. So I'm adding multiple colors here, but okay, I have to talk about the pressure of the pencil. So I'm just using a medium pressure. I'm not pressing too hard right now. Once I press too hard, it's going to be hard for me to blend. And when I'm using multiple colors next to each other, I feather out at the edge and then I start the color, overlap it, and then bring it out. That way it kind of blends easily. I keep turning my pencil. Keep kind of going back and forth. Before blending for the first time, I make sure I at least have 2 to 3 even layers of colored pencil, enough colored pencil to blend. Otherwise the wax on the colored pencil will not, it has to have enough wax for it to blend with the neo color. If you have very less pencil and you try to blend it, it's not gonna look nice. If I were to do this on paper, it's gonna take me at least 6 layers to get this sort of coverage. So you almost cut the time in half, is what I would say, depending on the piece that you're working on.
Ranjini, have you ever tried using watercolor pencils instead of the Neocolor 2s?
Yes, and I've never had the same amount of saturation by any watercolor pencil. The closest one that came was the Derwent. Most of them just washed away. So I just bunched up all my watercolor pencils. Oh yeah, this one. The Museum Aquarelle by Karandash. Yeah. Again, by Karandash. So this was the only one that had a good pigment coverage, like the Neo colors. But I found that the colored pencil didn't blend quite the same way as how it would with Neo colors. Maybe that's because of the binder that they use.
Yeah, I think it's because of the extra wax the Neo colors have.
So like the shine that you get, that satin finish, that was kind of missing. And I found it more difficult to blend or layer more. The Aquarelle actually ate the tooth of the pastel board pretty quickly.
I have another question. So when you use these, like last time Denise demonstrated, Gamsol or Spirit, then it is not mixed media, then it is pure pencil color.
When you use Gamsol with colored pencil, yes, it's just pure colored pencil.
And can you apply that after 3-4 layers also, or just?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can.
Of course, you can keep going. There's this artist called Gary Green. He works pretty much like that. His drawings are saturated with colored pencil and just mineral spirits.
Thank you.
Welcome. Just, you know, I'm a little sensitive to Gamsol. So when I'm doing my oil painting, I try to use other mediums, and I'm not sure if they would work with colored pencil. That's the reason I've never tried.
No, I'm just learning from your demonstrations only. So I'm just trying to understand what it is all about.
No. It's good. If you ask questions, it's always good for all of us. You know, we all learn by asking questions. You can see I am adding more color before blending, because when I blend, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna remove some of the color as well. This is not the amount of saturation you will see once I blend.
From here right now, it looks so smooth, it's hard to believe you would even need to use a brush on it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show it up close, and you know, once it's blended, makes like you'll see the difference, like before and after.
Okay.
So I'll save the highlights for the very end. Usually what I do is I finish the whole piece to like an 80% all over, and then I work throughout the piece to bring it to completion. That's usually the way I work. So this is just pencil. Let me push it up. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? Okay, so now I'm gonna use my brush. So I have this guy, and I've cut it short. As I said, it's pretty stiff. So the movement that I make is more like press down, and I kind of circle it around, and I blend. I move it like that, but in, you know, smaller circles. That's what I do. And I keep one brush for each family of colors, and also for value. So if I'm working with red, I keep one for lighter red and darker red. And I have them in multiple sizes as well, like a small one, wide one, a really tiny one for like, you know, if I have to get into small spaces. That really helps. And some of them, if you can't find a small brush, you can always cut the bristles like that to make shorter in whatever shape you want.
You could use a stencil brush too, couldn't you? Or do you find these are better for the job?
Which one, Denise?
A stencil brush, where it's round. The bristles are still flat, but they're very stiff, and it's a circular brush.
Yeah, that works as well if you want to get into those smaller. I'm used to using flats, so I just, you know.
Do you cut the ends off of the smaller brushes too?
Not so much unless it's needed. It's usually just the same way it is. But I'm not able to find those brushes anymore. I used to buy them at Michael's. Nowadays I just find these, so I have to cut them short.
Oh, a watercolor scrubber brush works pretty well too.
So once I blend, it's very smooth. Do you see?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that made a big difference. Huh?
Yes.
Makes a big difference. But you see all this dust that comes out. That if you don't take care of it right away, it's gonna settle into the board. So make sure you have a nice, good brush and gently tap that. If you still feel anything is sticking to the edges, a kneaded eraser, just go around it and it'll pull right off. I feel like I have any dust gathering and just go over it. So this is just one layer, but you can see the amount of saturation you have received, like you have come up with, right? It's almost like it's close to completion. Probably a couple of more layers and then I'll be done. Usually when I go for the darker areas, I start using my complement so that I can punch up my values quickly. I'll be like using a dark green and an indigo for my darker areas, and I punch up the values quickly. And I start with the background and then I come to my main subjects usually. How are we doing on time? Just making sure.
We are good. We have 15 more minutes if you want to continue.
Any other questions? Anything else that you
I have a question. I have one more question. So in colored pencil, do we do dark first or light first?
Okay, a very good question that I wanted to address. Usually when you work with any piece, this is just my way of working. I start with the midtone and then I go from darks to light. So establish my midtones and then I go from darks to light.
Okay.
But if you are working on paper using colored pencil, I know it's very hard to keep your white areas white, so you have to be extremely careful. You have to preserve them. But in pastel board, it's one of the easiest thing that I've found, that I will be able to layer lights over dark, and that's something that's very difficult when you're working with colored pencils on paper. So that's an example. Let's do. I'm not done with the cherry, but I just want to show you the highlight part of it. Oh, and some of the don'ts with neocolors. If you're when you're starting with a neocolor layer, you should have a good understanding of what color you're using. That's why I said, like, try to map it and try to know your color before you start applying the neocolor, right? Say, for example, I do with this one. I want to change this area to a lighter blue, and then I start try to add a lighter colored pencil on top of that. It's not going to work. It's going to be very difficult. So the tone, the value of the color is always have to match with your base neocolor. Is it clear? Mm-hmm. So you see how dark this area is, right? If I want to add white on top of this, I still will be able to add white on top of this. So let's try do that on our water drop here. So this one's pretty dry. Let's work on this one. Can you guys see it? Yeah. If I do it quickly. Let me see if I can zoom my video. My zoom worked before. Doesn't seem to. Okay. So I'm actually covering the whole drop with a light blue. And neocolor white is a very bright white that you can use as in your final layer to add fine details. So I keep adding a lighter color. It's like 2 layers already on top of my blue. So you see here, I'm not blending using any brush. I'm just using my colors to blend in. I'm using that local color to blend in. When you have these tight areas where you still want to blend, a good blender pencil that I like is the Caran d'Ache blender pencil. They're really good. And they work well with the Neocolor and colored pencil combo as well. And another kind of pencils for fine details is the Prisma Very Thins. They have a very strong lead and they're good for fine details. But these are regular pencils, but you can also use them.
What color is that, Ranjini?
The one that I used before was the indigo, and this is just plain black.
Okay.
So now I'm gonna add the white on top of all these layers, but you'll still be able to see it. So that's one of the good things about the pastel board. You can keep going for multiple layers. It's very forgiving, and you can still add a light highlight on top of all these colors. So to answer your question, with pastel board, you can work from darks to light or lights to dark, but I personally prefer establishing your midtone and then working from darks to light. To me, it's kind of the satisfaction you get at the end when you add that highlight and it just pops. So that's one of the reasons I want to work dark to light, I guess.
Fantastic.
I'm just gonna add that.
Just reminding 5 minutes more. Continue.
Sure. I'm just gonna add that white highlight and then I'm gonna stop. Just go over my notes to see if I miss saying anything, and I think I'm good. I wrote down everything that I wanted to say, so I might have missed some things, but yeah, I just want to make sure I say everything. It's just that, a lot of things you just process in your head, but you don't say it because you're used to doing it. It becomes like your second nature. But then when somebody's starting out, it's always better to give more information than less information, is what I feel. So the highlight, it's not white. I'm actually using the blue silver. I rarely do a white highlight unless, the subject really needs it. I just use like a 10% cool gray or a blue highlight because light's not white.
So can we also use neo colors for highlighting, or just
yes,
pencil?
You can. You can use the neo color, just use the wet brush
and
paint on top. That's completely fine. But when I do my final highlight and like the fine details, I don't blend that with using a bristle brush. Those are just left the same way. The highlight kind of shows up like a separate like a layer, because that's when the subject looks kind of, when you blend it, it's not gonna stand out so much. So I tend to leave my final layer not blended. I just leave it just like that. So that it kind of pops up. There you go.
Beautiful.
So let me go over my notes just to make sure if I said everything. So the transfer sheets that I use are the Saral transfer sheets. They're graphite-free transfer sheets. You can get them at any art store. And when you're transferring a drawing, please don't press too hard. That's going to leave an impression on the surface of the pastel board as well. So I did talk about the lighter colors. Yeah, I did. Oh yeah, the erasing part. There's one more eraser that kind of works on the pastel board. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's the Tombow Mono eraser. It kind of looks like that. This surface is also pretty rough. And this one works great on pastel board too. They remove the pastel, the neocolor as well as colored pencil to a certain extent. Not like the electric eraser, but this one will also work. These are really great. Anything else? Any other questions? I can send the list of materials and I think that might help.
Thank you so much.
If not, I think I'm done with the demo.
Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, fantastic
Thank
demo.
you so much, Ranjini.
Thank you.
I'll stop recording here.
This one.
Yeah, that's a beautiful demo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.